Today we're going on a deep dive, no scuba gear needed, to explore everything from, like, the tiniest building blocks of life
The blueprints of life.
to the awe-inspiring scale of the entire planet, the whole shebang.
And believe me, the journey from those tiny cells to the whole biosphere is way more exciting than any nature documentary.
Sign me up. So we're talking cells today, those microscopic cities that make up every living thing, right?
Right. And just like any city, you've got different boroughs, different neighborhoods.
Okay, I'm liking this city analogy. Tell me more.
So we'll start with prokaryotes. Think of them as like the studio apartments of the cell world. Small, efficient, get the job done. Bacteria, that's a prime example.
Got it. Prokaryotes, the studio apartments. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got
Eukaryotic cells.
Yeah.
Now these guys, they're living in those sprawling mansions.
fancy. What makes these eukaryotic mansions so special?
Well, for starters, they've got all those specialized rooms, we call them organelles, each one with its own important job to do, keeping the whole cell running smoothly.
So instead of a one-room studio, it's a multi-room mansion with, like, a home theater and a game room.
And a chef's kitchen.
Okay, I'm sold. What kind of specialized rooms are we talking about here? Give me an example.
Well, you can't have a mansion without a power source, right?
Hmm.
That's where the mitochondria come in, often called the powerhouse of the cell. They take the food we eat and, bam, turn it into usable energy.
Like the cell's very own energy drink factory. No wonder we'd be lost without mitochondria.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these awesome cells, prokaryotes in their studios, eukaryotes in their mansions. But how do they make more of themselves? I've heard these terms, mitosis and meiosis, and they always trip me up.
Don't worry, it's just cells hitting the dance floor. Mitosis, that's like the ultimate copy machine. One cell divides and boom, you've got two identical daughter cells.
So every cell in my body is basically a clone of that very first cell I started out with.
Pretty much.
That's mind-blowing.
Ah.
So what's meiosis all about then?
Meiosis. Now that's where things get really wild. Think genetic shuffling, mixing, remixing. This process is all about sexual reproduction and creating that beautiful diversity we see in all living things.
Okay, so like shuffling a deck of cards, you never know what hand you'll get. Makes sense why there's so many different types of plants and animals.
Exactly.
We've explored the blueprints, the studio apartments, the mega mansions. But let's zoom out for a sec. How does all of this, I don't know, fit together in the grand scheme of, well, life, the universe, everything?
That's where the amazing world of ecology comes in. It's about studying how all living things interact with each other and the environment, kind of like figuring out the social network of nature.
Okay, I can dig it. But
Yeah.
we're talking about a huge GE jump here from the microscopic level to like the entire planet. Where do we even begin?
We start by zooming out, like you said. We can begin with a single organism, say a lone fish navigating a coral reef.
Okay, so I'm picturing that zoom out feature on Google Maps.
Exactly. You start with a single house, then you see the whole block, then the neighborhood, the city.
And eventually, the whole wide world.
Right. So we've got our single fish, that's our individual. Now imagine a whole school of those fish swimming together. That's a population, a group of the same species in the same area.
Makes sense. What's next on our ecological zoom out?
Now picture all the different populations interacting on that coral reef, the fish, the corals themselves, the algae swaying in the current. That's a community, all these different species coexisting.
So it's like all the different folks who make up a neighborhood.
And then, to top it all off, we add in the non-living factors, things like the water, the sunlight, the temperature, all crucial for life. Put it all together, and you've got yourself an ecosystem.
And all those mind-bogglingly diverse ecosystems, from deserts to rainforests, they all contribute to.
The biosphere, the ultimate level of organization encompassing all life on Earth.
Wow, we really went from the micro to the macro in like 5 minutes.
And that, my friend, is the beauty of ecology. It's all about making connections.
Okay, we've scaled mountains of like biological organization, from tiny cells to vast ecosystems. But it makes you wonder, what fuels all this life? Like, it's not like organisms have little charging stations hidden in the environment, right?
Right. No charging stations. Think of it more like a giant, never-ending potluck. And the best part, the sun provides the main course.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more about this ecological potluck.
So it all starts with energy from the sun, right?
Mhm.
Producers, these are like the rock stars, the plants and algae. They're the chefs capturing that sunlight. And through this incredible process called photosynthesis, they whip up usable energy. They're basically the guests who bring those dishes everyone lines up for.
Okay, I'm with you. The plants are like the guests who show up with that amazing charcuterie board. So then what? What about the guests who, devour all that delicious energy?
Well, that's where our consumers come in, of course. The herbivores, the plant eaters, they're our primary consumers enjoying that solar energy secondhand.
Makes sense. So like a rabbit happily munching on clover in a field, soaking up the sun's energy that the clover captured.
Perfect example.
But a party can't be all appetizers, right?
Yeah.
What about those guests who, let's say, prefer a little more meat on their plates?
Well, every good party needs a bit of excitement. Our secondary and tertiary consumers, the carnivores, they bring that. They keep things interesting, keep those herbivore populations in check.
It's like a delicate dance, this whole predator-prey thing.
Exactly, a delicate balance.
Speaking of balance, not all the food at a party gets eaten. What happens to all the leftovers in our ecosystem?
Ah, the cleanup crew. That's where our decomposers come in, bacteria and fungi, the unsung heroes of the party, breaking down all that dead stuff, the waste, making sure nothing goes to waste. They're like the guests who stick around to help clean up so the party can keep going.
Nature's very own recycling system. Which actually reminds me, we were talking about biogeochemical cycles earlier.
Right. It's Earth's grand recycling program, but instead of plastic and paper, we're talking about those essential elements, things like carbon and nitrogen.
So just like how we recycle our trash, the Earth has its own system for these elements.
Exactly.
Okay, what's like a prime example of this natural recycling in action?
Well, take the carbon cycle, for example. Plants, they breathe in carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, use it to build those energy-rich molecules we talked about. Then when organisms, breathe, they exhale that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere.
It's like the Earth is breathing. That's wild. What about nitrogen? Isn't most of the air we breathe made of nitrogen? But we can't just, breathe it in and use it, right?
You're right. We need a little help from some special guests at the party, nitrogen-fixing bacteria.
Oh, right, the nitrogen fixers. They sound important.
Crucial. They can convert that atmospheric nitrogen into something usable, something plants can actually use, and then that gets passed along the food chain. Without them, our nitrogen cycle would be, well, toast.
It's incredible how these cycles are like the planet's life support system. But what happens when these ecosystems face, major disruptions, like a natural disaster? Is it game over or?
That's when we see just how resilient nature is. It's not game over. It's more like hitting the reset button. Ecosystems have this amazing way of bouncing back through this process called ecological succession.
Ecological succession. So the after-party cleanup and remodel.
Exactly. Imagine a wildfire tears through a forest, right? Devastating, but slowly life returns. First, the pioneer species, the tough ones, they show up first, like the friends who rally to help you clean up after a wild party.
And then more life joins the party as the ecosystem recovers.
Exactly. Over time, trees, shrubs, animals start coming back, and eventually you've got a thriving forest again. This, where the soil is already there, we call that secondary succession.
It's like nature has a knack for rebuilding. But what about situations where there's no before? Like, say, a brand new volcanic landscape that's starting from scratch.
You're talking about primary succession. Much slower process. Got to start from the ground up, literally forming soil from bare rock.
So instead of a post-party cleanup, it's like building a brand new party house from the ground up.
Exactly. Takes a lot more time, but eventually life finds a way.
From the smallest cells to entire ecosystems, it's amazing how adaptable and resilient nature is.
It really is remarkable. And understanding these processes, that's key to really grasping the delicate balance of nature and our role in protecting it.
So we've seen how ecosystems can bounce back from the worst things imaginable, but it's not always a walk in the park out there, is it?
You're telling me nature plays hardball? It's not always a friendly potluck. Sometimes it's more like, I don't know, a game of chess where everyone's fighting for survival.
Okay, I like that analogy. So beyond the cycles, the succession, what are the main, moves in this ecological game of chess?
Well, every good game needs rules, right? Or at least different types of interactions. We
Yeah.
usually break it down into four main ones: predation, competition, mutualism, and parasitism.
Okay, let's start with the most intense one, predation. Makes me think of those nature documentaries with the dramatic music and the slow-motion chases.
Exactly. The classic eat or be eaten scenario. Think lions stalking a zebra on the African savanna.
The lion being the predator, the zebra.
The main course, sadly, for the zebra. But it's this constant back and forth that shaped the evolution of both.
Right, like predators are always up in their game, sharper claws, better camouflage, the whole 9 yards.
And the prey, they're not just sitting ducks. They've got to evolve, too. Faster, sneakier, anything to avoid becoming lunch.
Talk about an evolutionary arms race. But it's not always about, eating each other. What about competition?
Yeah.
Especially when, like, resources are limited.
Competition is fierce. It's
Yeah.
all about who can snag those essential resources. Food, water, sunlight, even, mates.
So not always a physical fight to the death.
Sometimes it's more subtle, like who's best at adapting to the environment. Think two plants vying for that same patch of sunlight, or birds competing for the best nesting spot.
Survival of the fittest, or at least the most resourceful. So that's competition. But it's not always about outdoing each other, right? Sometimes cooperation's the name of the game.
Exactly. Mutualism, that's where everyone wins.
Okay, tell me more about these win-win situations. Nature's being nice for once.
Think bees and flowers, the classic example. Bees need that nectar, the pollen, and flowers need help with pollination. Everyone benefits.
A perfect partnership. But I have a feeling it's not always so harmonious in the natural world.
You got that right. Which brings us to, well, let's just say not all guests are welcome at the ecological party.
Parasitism. The party crashers. The uninvited guests who just won't leave.
Exactly. These guys, they've evolved to basically mooch off others, getting a free meal, a place to crash, often at the expense of their host.
Okay, now that's just rude. What are we talking here? Like ticks on a dog or...
Exactly, or mistletoe on a tree. Those are just a couple of examples. It's a reminder that nature, as beautiful and amazing as it is, can be pretty harsh.
That's for sure. Wow, we covered a ton today, from like the smallest units of life to these incredible interactions that shape entire ecosystems.
Absolutely. We've journeyed from the microscopic world of cells, those bustling cities within every living thing, to the vast interconnected web of life that spans our planet.
From energy flow to ecological succession, predator-prey relationships to those fascinating symbiotic partnerships, it's been quite a ride. And we've seen how even the smallest organisms, those nitrogen-fixing bacteria, for instance, play an absolutely crucial role.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of it all, the sheer complexity and wonder of the natural world.
Absolutely. So the next time you step outside, remember, you're not just an observer. You're a part of this incredible web of life, this ancient, ever-evolving story. And every organism, every interaction has a tale to tell.
So keep those eyes peeled, those ears open, and never stop questioning the world around you.
Well said. That's it for our deep dive from tiny cells to the entire planet. We'll see you next time, same place, for another exciting adventure into the natural world.